Well, good morning and welcome. My name is Robert Bell. I'm the Executive Director of the World Teleport Association as well as the Society of Satellite Professionals International. And I'd like to welcome you to the opening of our Content Distribution Forum here at NAB 2009. It's produced every year by those two organizations, SSPI and the World Teleport Association, as well as, of course, with the cooperation of NAB. From Monday through Wednesday, we will be presenting 12 panel sessions on the business and technology of content distribution, from traditional broadcasting to IPTV, from the triple play to mobile video. On Thursday, we will provide playback of the most popular sessions right here on the screen. Now, this program is made possible by the sponsorship of leading companies in the business, and they include Intelsat, the operator of the world's largest satellite fleet, Inmarsat, global leader in mobile satellite services, Umbrato Systems, which offers video processing solutions for HD broadcast cameras and tapeless studios, and Cisco Systems, provider of video, IPTV, cable, and content delivery solutions around the world. I also want to thank PSSI Global Services for providing live and recorded video coverage of the forum, which is available from the WTA site, the websites of SSPI and WTA, and you can visit them here at the Central Hall at booth C6448. And finally, if you're interested in learning more about either the World Teleport Association or SSPI, you'll find literature in the rack at the entrance to the forum. It's my pleasure now to introduce the moderator of this morning's first session. She is Lisa Hobbs, who is the Vice President for Business Development, Satellite, and Broadcast at a company called TANDBERG Television. Lisa?
Thank you, Robert, and welcome everyone bright and early on a Monday morning at NAB. I'm happy to see so many of you already here, and I hope that this is going to be a good panel. What I want to do is start out and actually introduce our panelists. Directly to my right is Simon Thrush. Simon is the Senior Vice President for Arqiva in the United States, part of Arqiva's Satellite and Media Division. He has full responsibility for Arqiva's bottom line success in the Americas and reports directly to the Managing Director of Satellite Media Solutions. Simon came to this position with an extensive background at Arqiva in the United Kingdom, and that has encompassed roles in management, satellite and cable network sales. Prior to his arrival at Arqiva's U.S. operation, which is based in Washington, D.C., he was based in the UK, where he was the Commercial Director for Broadcast Services and successfully grew Arqiva's satellite broadcast business and led the sales and pre-sales teams for the Satellite Media Solutions division. Next to Simon, we have Brian Morris. Brian is Vice President, Global Business Development for the Digital Media Networks Business Unit within Cisco's Service Provider Video Technology Group. And he is currently in this capacity, he leads the overall strategy of the Digital Media Network Unit and business development efforts in the broadcast, cable head-in, and IPTV market segments with a focus on video distribution solutions. Brian's been with Cisco by way of the Scientific Atlanta acquisition for 14 years. He most recently served as Vice President of R&D Operations and Product Management for SA's Digital Media Networks Business Unit, during which time he was responsible for developing the content distribution, satellite delivery, and head-end products for the company. And he also led several key initiatives, including the development of Scientific Atlanta's PowerView product line, their MPEG-4 advanced compression technologies, and system solutions. Next to Brian is Alistair Hamilton. Alistair is currently a partner and vice president at Digital Valence, which is a strategy and technology solutions firm, where he heads up the company's distribution and emerging platforms efforts. But prior to joining Digital Valence, Alistair was corporate senior vice president of platform research and development and worldwide distribution technology for Turner Broadcasting System. In this capacity, he led Turner's research and development activities in the areas of wireless, broadband, video, gaming, and related technologies, as well as the company's strategic software initiatives surrounding search and information retrieval, social networking, personalization and aggregation, and advanced advertising platforms. He also directed Turner's internal and external research projects to provide simulation and testing of new products and represented Turner's interests on industry standards bodies. And the last panelist that we have is Tom Parish. Tom is Vice President of Broadcast Technology for Globecomm Systems. He has over 40 years of experience in troposcatter, microwave, and satellite communication network engineering. And since early 1997, he has been focused on developing the digital video and audio broadcast capabilities at Globecomm Systems. In that time, his broadcast technology team has been responsible for winning large contracts to provide terrestrial repeater transmitter stations utilizing OFDM modulation for the Sirius Satellite Radio Network, designing and building a DVB-T terrestrial television station for the island kingdom of Tonga, working with Showtime to build their new broadcast center in Uplink, as well as many other smaller projects. In the DTH area, he has leveraged the latest state-of-the-art digital processing technologies to enable Globecomm to provide totally integrated broadcast center solutions to customers around the globe, with the latest being a media processing center for Bharti in India, which supports DTH, IPTV, and mobile television distribution. So these are the panelists that we have today. What I ask each of them to do, and as moderator I'm going to take advantage of this myself, is to give no more than a 3 to 5 minute overview of how they view this particular session's content. And that is basically, you've got one show, you have to get it to many platforms. How do you do that? What are the challenges, etc.? So each of them is going to take 3 to 5 minutes to kind of give their overview, and then we'll go into questions. I do want to stress, even though I have some questions that we can seed the panelists with, I would encourage some questions to come back from the audience so that you learn as much from this panel as is possible. Okay. To work, so. So basically today, there are a lot of consumer trends and market drivers that are changing the way we tend to look at video and television in general. Historically, video has been very linear. It's tended to be much more real time, going to a traditional television set. It's been very passive. It's generally been standard definition quality. You could sit down, you could turn a television on, and you didn't have to think about anything, didn't have to do anything else. It was there as passive entertainment. Times are definitely changing. Now what we have is television that you can get generally anywhere, anytime, and on pretty much any device you would like to see it on. So that it clearly includes device proliferation, which is really what we're going to be focusing on here this morning. But it includes video on demand and the fact that you can get the programming you want on your schedule, not on the broadcast network schedule. It includes IPTV. It includes advertising and on-demand advertising and targeted advertising. And clearly it includes high definition as well. So television is changing. We're going to be taking a look at one piece of this, which is how it's changing to get it to multiple platforms. There is one particular study which was done that I wanted to kind of use to set the stage for this particular conference. And basically it indicates, you know, what devices do users actually watch television on? And there are a couple of things to pull out of this. Clearly the younger generation, okay, teenagers, folks in their 20s and 30s, there is a lot of television viewing on personal computers, mobile telephones, other handheld devices. But interestingly, and I think it may have come as a surprise to the folks that did the study, even some of the older people, the people that you tend to think are only watching television on a television, in fact, are looking at video on personal computers, even on cell phones. But even more striking to me when I looked at this particular study was the fact that of the younger generation, and in fact across every age group that was part of this study, people are still watching video the most on a traditional home television set. And so what I would throw out is that one thing potentially that we need to do as we try to figure out how to get that one piece of video content, that one show, to a multitude of platforms for people to view, is that in fact we need to make sure we don't do so in a way that harms the viewing element of people actually watching normal television, because clearly normal television is still a very popular way to watch the video. And with that, what I am going to do is turn it over to Simon, and I believe Simon's got a few words to say at this point as well.
Good morning. I chose not to do slides this morning simply because as a satellite service provider, and in fact a service provider to most of the major broadcasters, it's very difficult for us to put up slides that would show how our customers access a number of media platforms, simply because it's down to them to tell us how they'd like to do it. Our experience has been that the business cases and plans are taking long to develop for these broadcasters, rights holders. So for us as a traditional provider of services from our teleports, I should add Arqiva has some 10 teleports around the US and Europe. We really follow the trends of our customers and also obviously of their customers themselves to support the businesses. I had a discussion earlier with a colleague that talked about the fact that, you know, as an operator, we're often the last people to be engaged in the rollout of taking new channels to new markets, to putting different services on different platforms. We're often asked to engage in last-minute tendering processes that make it difficult for us because we have significant investment as a ground segment operator, as a provider of infrastructure to support a lot of these opportunities. It's not to say that we wouldn't want to do that, and we're keen to do that. But it's a very different play, I think, from those channels that, well, it's a very different play from those people who either own the boxes at the end of the day that are manufacturers, or those programmers that own the rights that just want to get their content out to their customers themselves. We are really at the front end of the chain trying to understand what their business plan is like. Will it work? Won't it work? What are the numbers they need to hit? That gets pushed back down to us as well. And we're not unique. We're not the only service provider in the US or in Europe that faces these challenges and these problems. But certainly it is something that we have to be very aware of when we're talking to our customers, our partners who want to distribute content out. And certainly our interest really is how the mechanics and the business plans work for coming away from traditional linear video and going out into new mobile devices, the new media, because our experience has been, as I said, particularly in Europe, where as a company Arqiva is much more prevalent in Europe, the vast majority of our assets are based there, it is much harder to understand their business plans and their justification for spending more money, particularly as money is tight in the current economy, on new platforms, new customers, new acquisitions of customers, until we can support them at the back end.
Thank you, Simon. And now I just have to... If I can find yours. Yeah. Just have to... It was up here.
I swear.
There. Oops, I just went past it too. Yeah. Right there. And then you can just advance.
This way?
Yeah, that way.
Got it. I think that's because I sent this presentation to Lisa last night about 1 in the morning. It's kind of lost it. Let me just introduce just a few concepts that are in line with what Lisa has discussed, and what we're trying to.
You may want to get a little closer to the mic.
Sorry. What we're trying to introduce is a change in consumption models of video from a service provider's perspective, where video consumption is being changed from actually a consumption of video to a change in service experience to the end consumer. So our view is you're transforming video experiences, differentiating to the end user. It is based on advanced platforms, IP-based platforms. There's a change in virtualization of the content and how people manage and scale that content. And then also there's emerging business models that we have to be aware of how people are going to monetize content as it's being consumed in different manners. We view it in a few different ways. When you start to look at transforming the video experience, it's somewhat personalized. People are looking at multi-screen deliveries. They're looking at multiple formats of internet streaming, network PVR, targeted advertising. It's also social. People start looking at Web 2.0, simultaneous viewing of content, and telepresence or Skype. People actually are starting to look at video in a much different fashion, in a social perspective. And then also in an interactive way. People look at VOD. They're looking at rapid channel changes, time shifting, and session shifting. So people are consuming content in a dramatically different manner. So what happens to the end user experience? It is now unrestricted by time, space, and device. And you can see that the experience starts to change the way people are consuming video. And this is video that's created personally. It's video that is acquired by content owners across service platforms. We look at it as social video, rich media, broadcasts, personalized, and Web 2.0. It's a dramatically different environment for consuming video. And it's device independent. People want to, like Lisa said, most people are still consuming on their HD sets, but they want to be able to consume on their TVs, on their laptops, and on their mobile devices in many different fashions. So again, it's a change in a consumption pattern and how people will view video and consume video. The other thing to be very aware of is you have to take a look at evolving business models. How are people going to start to monetize video? The old advent of having video come across a service provider being sponsored by ad dollars is changing dramatically as people start to consume video in dramatically different ways. You have to take a look at the architecture and the infrastructure behind these different consumption patterns that allowed video to get to the TV, to the mobile device, to the PC. And our view is it's very much a network platform that's got different applications running on it. And a lot of these consumption patterns actually start changing in the household. I look at my own children, very young. They consume video on PCs. They Skype their relatives in different parts of the world. There's dramatically different benefits and dramatically different ways, and these consumption patterns start out of the home. And there I am, the older gentleman on the side that is starting to consume. The affluent will take off, but I actually do consume video in different ways. I'll stop there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brian. There you go.
Okay, so I don't have as fancy a slideshow as Brian does, but so I'm coming at this from the content company's perspective, and this is just words on a slide here, but clearly from a content company's perspective, we'd like to be able to make the content once and use it everywhere, and this is sort of a list, almost like a timeline in a way. You know, obviously we all the content companies started with traditional platforms, satellite, local television, cable, DTH, for analog TV, and then of course moving into the digital MPEG-2 world. So then along came the internet in the mid-90s, and so we all did brand extensions. You know, we had .com sites, we had stream content via portals, etc. And that was the next thing that took us through the rest of the 90s into the early 2000s. Then mobility, then cell phones came along with a reasonable capability. And so we began to think about how to get content to cell phones and PDAs, and then downloadable applications, the iPhone, the iTunes portal, etc. And then lastly, a relatively new phenomenon is obviously user-generated content and the social networking sites. Obviously, the distribution there is viral. It's not under our control. And often, there's intellectual property violation where content is basically sort of stolen and repurposed. And that's certainly a concern for all content companies. So moving on from the sort of, one show, multiple platforms, the reality is somewhat different from the content company's perspective. There are most favored nations issues to consider. If we start streaming content, I mean, in Turner's case, speaking from Turner's perspective, our bread and butter revenue stream is from the cable operators. If we start broadly streaming content for free on the web, that's going to start violating MFN issues. So those are without question issues that have to be considered. Secondly, content rights. In the early days, before the advent of all these new platforms, no one really worried about content on the internet because it didn't exist, in practical terms until the mid-90s. Same with mobile. So nowadays, when content deals are done, the deals are struck for every single platform. The content originators, and certainly in Turner's case, on the entertainment side, much of the content is not owned by Turner. It's syndicated content, and those originators are very smart about negotiating rights issues, and we simply don't have the rights to put that content on multiple platforms. Protecting the brand image. Some platforms, clearly no one's going to watch a movie or anything really long form on a cell phone, so you have to be a little bit careful to protect the brand image depending on the platform that you're sending it to. And then the need to reskin content. The whole notion of make it once and use it everywhere is not really practical. I mean, any of the small crawls that you would be fine watching on a big, flat panel TV clearly are not going to work for a cell phone screen that's 2 inches square. So stuff needs to be reskinned, and that has a cost attached. Then lastly, business model. Is that model sustainable? That's the real key for all these content companies. Am I doing on time? Okay. Technology-wise, is there almost. I mean, there's no question. I mean, Lisa's company, Brian's company, are in the digital encoding business. We all know that exists, and it's great. I mean, everyone's at the cutting edge. Encapsulation, DRM, all good stuff. Same with, format transcoding, MPEG-4, MPEG-2, all those conversions, etc., peer-to-peer for bandwidth reduction. That's all out there. But some of the bits are still missing. Sharing content, when teenagers share content from a cell phone between devices, sometimes the DRM and the copy protection, work needs to be done still in that space. Add insertion on portable devices. If owners of cell phones are going to pay us a subscription model for the content they get on their portable, that's great. But in practical terms, that's not going to happen all the time. And so ad insertion on portable devices is going to be important. Set-top level targeting. There's no question companies like Visible World, NVIDIA are in that space, but again, there's more work to be done there to allow us to target right down to an individual set-top. And then lastly, mining the audience data is critical for us, without question. If we don't know who's watching and what they're watching, what they skip, that's key. Running out of time, right? Okay. So the ideal scenario clearly is, one large centralized content repository, banks of transcoders, each bank per different platform, different bit rates, flexible asset management, and obviously the DRM and the CAS to go along with it. Challenge is, the content varies by device, as do the data rates, clearly. DRM, likewise, and the metadata and the data mining as well. I mean, all of those are issues, when you go across multiple platforms. This is my last slide. Golden rules. If we can't protect the content, how can we convince people to pay for it? And then the second point there, if we can't measure it, how can we monetize it effectively? Those are two very key issues. Thank you. Fancy graphics. What's that?
Good morning. Noticed on Lisa's slide that she had the different generations. I guess I'm in the mature generation. You can tell that by my white hair. When I was a boy, our entertainment was the radio, and we had a record player that you had to wind up that we had bought before the Second World War. It wasn't until the 1950s that we got television. I was brought up in the Midwest, so we were a little later than the New York area. And then we had, at the most, 3 channels. It started at 5 in the afternoon, Howdy Doody, and a lot of us didn't have a television, so all the neighborhood kids would go to the one house that did, and we'd sit and watch Howdy Doody. TV was over at 10 o'clock at night. Today, the content and device diversity is becoming much more complex, and I think my grandchildren probably understand it better than me. I'm not quite sure, but there's been this huge content explosion. You've got the networks, the independents, the studios, YouTube, Hulu, iTunes, and on, which from when I was a kid, it's a huge change. You got the device expansion. I mean, the rest of the panelists have also talked about this. A couple of weeks back, President Obama was on The Tonight Show with Jay Leno. That was past my bedtime. When you reach my age, you go to bed at 9 o'clock at night. So I went to Hulu and was able to watch the entire segment of President Obama with Jay Leno on The Tonight Show. And actually, the quality was very good. Some of the quality is good and some isn't so good. I also missed an episode of 24, and so I went to Fox to try to see it. For the first half hour, things were fine, and then it started stopping and moving forward and stopping. So I'm not so sure that internet television is quite here yet. For the content owners, they definitely would like to expand their market penetration. Certainly, if you can take your content that you have and put it onto more platforms, you can make more money. But one of the things, and this was mentioned before, I mean, you need secure transcoding and processing of that content. To a content owner, I mean, that's everything. The security of that content is very important. And basically, what they want is a multi-format distribution network for many platforms. And with all the different platforms today, that may not be possible for that content owner. He may have to outsource that to go to a content hosting and distribution model. So one show, many platforms. Just a quick picture. Basically, you know, the process is that you have acquisition, then you process the material through a methodology of transcoder. That transcoder may not be a single device. In a lot of cases, it's not. It's multiple devices doing that. It's put into file format, goes to a media server, and then it's played out. Or the file could be transferred to, for example, if you had mobile, a file for mobile phones, you may go to ATT or somebody like that. Just for the novices, the people that really don't know, I mean, I would assume that not everybody knows what transcoding is all about, but it's basically a key process that changes the video asset's file format, its resolution, its bit rate, or its coding. It could be MPEG-2. You want to change it to MPEG-4. It could be standard definition. You want to change to high definition. The bit rate is going to be certainly different for 1080p, high definition television, and then what you would have on a cell phone, which has probably got a different frame rate and a different bit rate. So the three key transcoding processes are our file-to-file, which is pre-transcoding, real-time streaming, and on-demand, which is transactional. So in order to provide any content, anytime, any place, the transcoding has to be able to tailor that content to suit the device, the delivery channel, and the end user. Thank you.
Just going to try to leave this slide up for you so that you remember who the panelists were. Before we get into some of the questions that I had come up with to try to stimulate some conversation, Do we have any questions right now from the audience? We've got a microphone, I think, that can be passed around, and we just, anybody awake enough yet to have questions of their own, information they want, or... All right. Let me encourage you as we go through for the next half hour or so on this panel, as you do have questions, please feel free, raise your hand. We'll try to take you at that point, because really we do want this to be a learning experience for all of you, so we would encourage you to ask away, and if we can't answer, I'm sure we might be able to guide you to someone somewhere on the show floor that perhaps can answer your question. So let me start out, and Tom, I'm going to direct this first question to you, and then others on the panel can answer. We've mentioned briefly during some of the presentations that there are certainly challenges associated with taking one show and attempting to get it to many different platforms. But what are some of those challenges where you can have content that's processed for distribution in multiple formats across multiple platforms? What really are some of the gotchas that everybody's got to be aware of, and are there any solutions to them?
Thank you, Lisa. Is this from, I guess this is working, right? Okay. Well, I think Alistair brought up one of the key points, and that has to do with the security of the content, the digital rights management that has to go along with it. As a content owner, it's very important that you keep your content secure. An example, we run Showtime's VOD service out of our facility. However, even though we own the equipment, we maintain it. The operators are Showtime employees. The tapes come to that facility. Nobody touches it other than a Showtime employee. There are organizations like TVN that could do the VOD distribution for them, but that content is so important to them, they don't want it out of their hands. So this is one of the major concerns that a content owner has. How is he going to distribute it? I mean, not everybody has 5 different fiber providers into their facility, a satellite farm sitting next to their building, or all the other distribution methodologies that you would require to reach all of these platforms that you got to go to. So for a content owner, there's a lot of challenges. Now, if you were a person that was doing content hosting, you got a whole new set of challenges, because virtually every bit of content is in a different format. It has a different wrapper on it that you have to take that wrapper and take it off. You have to decode what you have. Now you re-encode it into the new format that you want to distribute it to. So there are a tremendous number of challenges associated with basically the content hosting and distribution.
Maybe one thing to add is that there are a lot of complexities. You're looking to try to provide any content to any device, and all content will not be viewed in the same way. You can imagine trying to watch a sitcom or a football game on your 42-inch HD plasma, and then you could imagine trying to watch that same content on a PC, or more importantly, an iPhone. It is going to be done in a much different fashion. And when you take a look at all the different scalings, you take a look at the different payload levels, how are you going to manage those assets? It is quite a challenge to take a look at it. So there are many, many different variables.
I think for us it's kind of similar to what Tom said, actually. In an ideal world, every single one of our customers would want their programs distributed in the same way, with the same bits of kit, and it'd be very easy, be very cost effective, and in fact all of our customers and consumers would benefit. But that's not the world we live in, and what happens is one major broadcaster may want their content transcoded and delivered in one way, the next major broadcaster want it in a different way. At the end of the day, a lot of these are sort of small pull-through for revenue for them, and they want to make it as cost-effective as well. It's a real challenge for us as an operator to be able to make that as cost-effective. And also, one thing that we've found and we've seen, a lot of content owners want to try this, And the problem is for us is once you've bought the kit, you've bought the kit, and you've got to buy the kit, you've got to put the investment in it, you've got to put the capital in to do it. It's very difficult just to try something to see whether it works and whether that's something your consumers want. And we continue to face that and work with our customers, but it continues to be a challenge for us.
Tom touched on something briefly in terms of the fact that you have to store all of this content and what format are you actually getting it in. And Brian, I may direct this question to you, at least initially. Is there a single preferred baseline format, if you will, that is the best to store the content at the beginning to facilitate it being turned into the appropriate platform for all of the devices that content is going to, or is it really still up in the air?
Our view is it's still very much up in the air. I mean, I think what we would say our preference would be in an H.264 format. It is one of the more efficient formats for it to be used in. It's scalable. It can be reformatted more readily than some of the older technologies. But to be quite frank, I think it's very much up in the air at this time.
Okay, let me ask, you'd indicated H.264, MPEG-4 basically, but what happens if that content that you're storing not only needs to be used for distribution, but also potentially still needs to be used for production and actually needs to maybe go through other edits, etc.? Would it still be MPEG-4, or does it actually need to go back a level at that point? And I don't know, Brian, maybe Alistair, I don't know if you've got...
I mean, Brian's right. I mean, at Turner we used to have content stored, in all different forms, in uncompressed form, which obviously takes huge amounts of storage, but that gives you almost the most flexibility. If you've got to start transcoding, a lot of that stuff is not a lossless process. So that's a concern. If we've got everything mastered in MPEG-4, because of the differences in the macro block structure and the whole GOP structure between MPEG-4 and MPEG-2, you're going to have loss in that conversion. So, I mean, it's a question. It's really, there's a variety of different formats really based on where the content originates, essentially. I mean, some of the stuff we get, sent in file transfer form, there's really an array of different formats. It depends on where it comes from.
Okay. Tom?
Yeah, I think as a content owner, I would try to. Most people are going to MPEG-4 today, so obviously that's one of the things I would do. But I would encode it at as high a rate as I could. Right now, in our booth, I shouldn't be giving a plug, but in our booth, we have some high-definition television going down over there for one of our customers, and he uses 100 megabits per second MPEG-4 high definition. And when you have content with very high resolution and high encoding, well, then you can do the editing and the other things, and it's easier to break it down than to bring it up, because you can't replace what's lost.
Okay. Let me touch on the asset management. So we've talked about storage. Everyone seems to believe maybe high bitrate MPEG-4 or something like that. How does a content provider or a content distributor manage all of this content now? I mean, it starts out as one show, but ultimately it could end up on set-top devices. It could end up on 300 different types of cell phones, all of which have their own nuances. How is one supposed to manage all of that content and that distribution and make sure it's actually gotten where it's supposed to go in the right format? Maybe, Brian, do you want to?
Well, a lot of these tools are still what we consider under development, but that's one of the things I alluded to in the first talk, is that the asset management is going to be a very large challenge. We are looking inside our company and developing tools that allow the management of those assets. Some are going to be real-time and some will be stored, but I don't think there are actual end results to a complete tool set available on the market today.
Okay. Simon, do you have?
Yeah, we would agree with that. We've got a fairly large R&D group that looks into this, and our challenge with our customers is finding, and I would agree totally, there isn't one set that fits all at the moment. We're certainly finding a way, working with our clients to understand, well, how do you manage that? How do you agree that it gets to the end device and it's working correctly? And I don't think there's anything actually that fits in the marketplace right now that you could buy off the shelf that would do that.
Okay. Alistair, I think maybe you had touched on this in your presentation. We're talking about one show, sending it to many different platforms, and yet is it really, truly the same content? I mean, you had mentioned, what if you have scrolls going across which look just great on a 50-inch high-definition television, but how are you going to see that scrolling on a cell phone, for instance? And what does that mean for a content provider in actually not only having to deal with transcoding into a specific format, but now changing actually what that content looks like?
I mean, you're correct. The content is not is often not the same. I mean, it would be ideal if we could make it the same, but in reality, you can't do the scrolls. There's a lot of things that you really, I mean, sports, and anything with a small ball whizzing around on a mobile screen, for example, is just not viewable, period. So then do you repurpose that? Do you have a different shot that's tighter in, for example? I mean, there's actually a fair amount of work in repurposing content to really enhance, the platform that it's being viewed on. So it's not a straightforward job at all. There's absolutely extra work required. And then the question is, does the business model, does the revenue that you derive from that extra platform sort of exposure, does that cover the cost of the repurposing? And the answer is often it doesn't.
And let me follow on with that and open it up to some of the other panelists. Who has to do that repurposing? Is it the content provider? Is the fact that his show now has to go to so many different devices actually creating substantially more work for the content provider, or is that maybe a new function that is opening up and some other part of the industry is actually now looking to try to pick that up? Tom?
Well, it all depends on the content provider. I mean, if you look at the major networks, NBC, CBS, right now they're basically, you have your television, but they're also streaming out to the internet, and they're also providing their content for mobile. In the case of NBC, they do it themselves. In the case of CBS, they outsource it. So it depends on who has the content and how secure they feel in the people that they outsource it to, if they do that outsourcing.
Okay, Brian?
I would make one more notice. Like Tom said, it could be outsourced, it could be done internally, but the content owner themselves will be very, very objective about ensuring that the quality of their brand and their content is maintained. So you can't distract or degrade the viewing experience, no matter what device it goes onto.
Okay.
So.
And I think it's, in the words of my wife, down to size, in terms of the major broadcasters can afford to do this themselves and do it themselves because they can do it in-house. If you come into Europe, for instance, if you come down to second and third tier broadcasters, they don't have the personnel, they don't have the infrastructure, they don't have the resources to do it. The problem happens then is they need to go out to an operator such as ourselves, and then quite frankly, we of course have to charge them to this degree. So it's chicken and egg really, because it costs them money to go out and do it. But there's a fine line between them making some money on different platforms they want to get out to and how they recover it. And I agree with the panelists is then to the quality of the program that goes out, the transcoding, and they like to keep that very tight indeed. I think if you're a major rights holder, you can do it yourself. Anything below that is a real struggle at the moment.
Okay. Do we have any questions at all from the audience? Just want to make sure we don't let any of you get away with a question that hasn't been answered. Yes, we do have one here. We've Can
just shout, we'll repeat the question. think it was me that mentioned peer-to-peer. Yeah, it's something that we had looked into a good bit. Clearly, we're interested in reducing our bandwidth costs, and if we can, if we can use someone else's bandwidth and not have to pay for everything, that's great. We, in the R&D side, we did a pretty detailed analysis of the various peer-to-peer companies. The one that we're using the most now is Octoshape, and it's been pretty successful. We've done the November sort of election and then the inauguration using peer-to-peer transmission. It was pretty effective. So it's definitely something. In fact, others in the Time Warner Group are doing content distribution using peer-to-peer as well. So it's definitely something that we've embraced. There was initially a nervousness on the part of the management because of the negative connotation of torrent-type algorithms, from the early days of sort of the illegal content companies that were illegal content stuff. But they've got over that now. Now they realize the advantages of using peer-to-peer. So it's definitely something that certainly from Turner's perspective, being fairly broadly used now.
Okay.
Any other takers?
Let me circle back to something that I believe Alistair had in his presentation, because it is near and dear to the content providers themselves. And that is this issue of digital rights management and copy protection and the relationship, if you will, between the content owners and the distribution platforms today of that content. I certainly know, and we're at the National Association of Broadcasters show, there has been a lot in the industry trade press about what happens when someone like Fox or NBC does start streaming their content over the web, for instance, for people to watch. What does that do to the local broadcast affiliates who are, originally were the only ones who had the rights to show that content, certainly until it went into syndication? How is the fact that consumers want that core content on so many different platforms potentially going to change the paradigm of how a content owner works with many of the distribution platforms, be that broadcast affiliate or cable operator or telco provider?
Let me take that. I mean, this is certainly a huge issue. I mean, if you take the the Turner model, the principal distribution from the Turner networks is to the cable industry. If we as a company start streaming, if Turner as a company starts streaming content in sort of an over-the-top play, they're undermining their core business, and we are, unwittingly part of that problem. So it is a huge issue as to what can be streamed for free relative to what we're sending out on our linear networks that we're charging the cable operators for, and they in turn are charging their customers. Same with content really on all other platforms. I mean, all of the carriage deals have most favored nations language in them, and so as a company, the content companies have to be very, very careful not to undermine some of their core business plans by making certain types of content available on certain platforms. I mean, it's as simple as that. Aside of whether the business model works, it's not clear to me, say in the mobile side, for example, companies with video would love to stream video to every cell phone on the planet. The reality is that only a very small fraction of cell phones are actually capable enough in terms of processing and memory to actually produce a reasonably decent picture. Every cell phone can get a text SMS type message. Most phones have got some basic browser, so a WAP site is doable. But sending streamed content to cell phones is not as broad as people might think. And then the question is that the business model too. Are the cell phone owners going to expect it for free? In which case we have to have advertising embedded in the streams, either sort of post-roll and pre-roll, or are they willing to pay a subscription? In many cases, leaving aside the iTunes download thing, which is quite clear, it's still not clear what the business model is, which is why I suspect that many companies that have content streamed to phones are probably not making a huge amount of money, and yet there is a cost up front to repurpose the content for them. So there's definitely a question there.
Okay. Brian?
I think we may add, too, that we believe this is an evolving business model, meaning there is a lot of demand for consumption of video outside the home and outside the TV set. When you look at demographics, both from an age perspective and from internationally, people are starting to demand or try to acquire more and more content that is not in the home and not on the TV. There was recently some publications by the CEO of Viacom and the CEO of Disney, actually. And there were almost two different scenarios. One believed that if their content was packaged as part of a subscription fee, that he would be happy. And the other one wanted subscription fees for the different devices. So I think the fair thing to say is this is a business problem, a business model that is evolving.
Okay. So there are clearly still business issues then that need to be worked out in all of this. Tom?
I think it's going to be a while coming. A lot of the content owners, they license the rights to people like DirecTV or Dish Network. It's solely for direct-to-home distribution. They will license to NRTC the rights for IPTV. It's solely for IPTV. So a lot of the way it has been going up to now has been giving the rights for a particular specific platform. It gets worse than that because our facility is 2 blocks from Viacom where MTV goes up. I had a requirement to provide MTV to an African country. And in order to do that, I had to get the MTV content from Europe rather than 2 blocks away from me, bring it through the London Tower, and then by fiber back to the U.S., and then send it back to Africa. So, I mean, so the paradigm has to change. So, the need, there has to be a need, and once they have that need, maybe the this rights thing will resolve itself.
Do we have any audience members? Yes. Okay, I'm sorry, you might need to come up a little closer if we have a microphone so we can hear you.
I mean, certainly mobile is an area, again, notwithstanding the mechanics of the business model. Mobile is definitely an area where, incremental revenue, is being generated. There's no question. Both from, there is a small amount of ad revenue being derived, and, certainly from Time Warner's perspective, they've got some downloadable apps on the iTunes site, so there's money being made on the iPhones. That's one area I would say. That's probably the fastest growing one. I think the other thing that content companies are trying to figure out is how to monetize sort of social networking sites. Everybody can see, the success of, the Twitters, the MySpace, the Facebooks. But it's, what's the business model for individual content companies and how they're going to make money from that? I think from Turner's perspective, they would love to have some kind of news-oriented social networking site. But the mechanics of how to make it successful and how to monetize it are still subject of much discussion. So those would be 2 areas I would flag.
We would agree with Alistair. Also, if you take a look at worldwide and you take a look at the penetration rates of TVs that are served either by satellite or cable, then take a look at broadband, and then take a look at actual cell phone penetration rates. I mean, I can't remember the actual numbers, but it's 20 or 30x cell phone penetration. I think it's even higher than that, than it is to TV sets. So a critical area to look at is mobile delivery of content.
Okay. Any others from the audience right now? Okay. Let me throw this one out, and I apologize because I intended to ask the panelists before we started the panel if this was something they would be able to talk about. So I may get met with dead silence here, but we'll see. I have heard myself a lot of content providers talk about scalable video coding. and almost talking about it as though it's the Holy Grail. And for those of you in the audience who may not be familiar with scalable video coding, basically it says that you code the video in a single base format and add enhancement layers then to that video, send all of that out, and then each individual receive device is able to receive and decode that portion of the video with the appropriate enhancement layer that it understands, and it ignores anything else. So if it can only do the very, very basic level, that's all it takes. But if it's a high definition device and the information is there to make the video high definition, it will produce a high definition picture. And I guess my question is, given we're talking about trying to take one show and send it to all of these platforms, is scalable video coding something that might be there in the future to help content providers actually realize this goal, or is it still a little bit of a pipe dream?
So, Lisa, what we would say is scale video coding is very powerful, and we're implementing it on some of our new products, but we don't believe it's the Holy Grail. I mean, you'd have to say that there's one content to many devices, but really what it is many contents to many devices. And just take a look at, let's say, a news clip. A news clip viewed on, or David Letterman viewed on a TV set, will not be viewed in the same way on an iPhone. You'd have to take that content, crop it, bring it up in order to see that content properly. So SVC is a very strong tool we're implementing, but we don't believe it's the Holy Grail.
Okay. Tom?
I mean, even right now for internet television, you've got Microsoft Windows Media 9, you've got Flash. There's probably 10 different formats that people are streaming out video on the internet. To have that happen, you'd have to have standards, standards that everybody is adhering to. It'll never happen in the U.S. It might happen in Europe, but and there's a total lack of standards right now today. So without having a standards and having everybody agree to it, which will probably take 10 years, I don't see it happening.
Okay. Simon?
Yeah, I think I would agree. If you look in the European model, it's really the BBC that lead this sort of thing, and what they do, most others follow because of the way they're funded. And I see it for us as a provider to get involved in this years and years in the future. And I think we ought to sort out what we can make money on right now, what our customers can make money on right now, rather than, at the end of the day, confusing our customers and consumers.
Okay.
I'll have one last comment on that from the content provider's perspective. I suspect it adds a level of complexity that we don't probably need at the moment. I could see the value of having a base encoding layer and then incremental add-ons where we're distributing our content over a link with an uncertain quality. If the quality is poor, then the link drops back to the base level, and if the quality of the link is good, then you can ratchet up. But if you're distributing, say to a cable system, we can get a very relatively inexpensive, MPEG-2 or MPEG-4 encoder and set the dial to whatever we set it to, 5.5 megs. And the link parameters are pretty much known. I think for platforms where there's an uncertain link quality and link margin, then I could see there might be an advantage to that. But I think where the link parameters are well known, notwithstanding statistical multiplexing that's been around obviously forever and a day, I suspect that what you described may add complexity and cost that we may not yet be willing to pay for.
Okay. Well, and at that, it is 11 o'clock, so I'm going to thank all of our panelists for a wonderful first session of NAB. And I would also like to invite all of our audience members to come back or stick around for the next session, which is scheduled to start at 10 minutes after 11 and is entitled The Mobile Video Standards Wars. So thank you very much for your attention this morning.